used AI to do any kind of role playing? Anyone ever use like ChatGPT or Gemini or anything and tried a role play session? Yeah, Mira? Okay. Have a few. Okay. Awesome. Now, I'm curious, how many of you have attempted to have AI like Gemini or ChatGPT be the agent? Because you're like, I want to learn how AI becomes the agent and what AI says. How many of you have actually done it that way, where you had the AI be the agent instead of the buyer or seller? Yep. So a lot of the misconceptions with AI stem from this idea that AI knows best. And what I've found out is that AI makes a great human, meaning a buyer or seller. In my experience, AI has not made a great agent. And some people might wonder why. It's like, well, why would AI not make a great agent if it has all this knowledge base on how to do everything and handle objections? Well, the bottom line is there's a lot of bad information out there that AI has been trained on. Right, there's a lot of recycled stuff that no longer applies, and AI is built its model on some of that stuff. And so what you end up getting kind of a role play that, let's just say, goes way too fast. I'm going to do something here as we go, and I'll kind of share with you just so you can get an idea and a feel of this as well too. Let me share this. Okay, everyone can see that okay? All right. So I'm going to use Gemini for this, for our stuff here, just because we have this for free. We actually have the pro version available through KW. But also too, what I want to show you just to start out with, for those of you who use Gemini, you can use ChatGPT, you can use Claude, you can use whatever you want. I'm going to use Gemini here. For role playing, use fast. Don't use thinking or pro if you have it. Use fast, because what you want to do is you don't want it to spend a lot of time thinking about it, because that's not a very real situation if you're doing a role play. All right. So then if we were to look at, let's try, because we could do this actually pretty quick. I'm going to show you what happens when you use AI as the agent. You're like, oh, just give me an example of how this works. And I'll use open houses as an example, just because a lot of people are familiar with this process. So I'm going to put in here, and by the way, I use a product called WhisperFlow to transcribe what I'm saying, essentially. You can also use the microphone. I use WhisperFlow because it's a little bit more accurate. So I'm going to put in a quick prompt here, and I'll show you just real quick how this turns out. So, and what happens, I'll talk into this, but you won't see the text until a few seconds later. So I'd like to do a role play with you. I want you to be a real estate agent with Keller Williams, who is holding an open house, and I'm a prospective buyer who has stopped by the open house. We went through the initial greeting, and you had sent me and my wife off to tour the house. We circle back around to the kitchen where you currently are after touring the rest of the house on our own. Your goal is to get us to schedule a buyer consultation with you. So we'll give it a second here. There we go. Don't be concerned if there are some words that aren't quite the right word or whatever. Don't worry about punctuation or anything like that. The AI can figure it out. So I just spoke that in there. That's my prompt. I'm just going to hit enter. So you can already tell, like in the first sentence, they're like, uh-oh, I'm being pitched, right? Welcome back to the heart of the home. I was just admiring how that natural light hits the quartz countertops this time of day. Is a game changer for morning coffee, isn't it? Now, does that feel kind of gross to you? Or is it just me? Right? So, it tells all this stuff. Now you've had a chance to wander through the house, get a feel for now from the primary suite upstairs. So it's basically given all the features, right? It's just is there a specific room that's already making you think about where your furniture would go, or a few things that are on your must-have list that we're still looking for? Now, not all that is horrible, but a lot of it is, right? You just kind of feel like it's like, oh, this is a feature dump or something like that, right? But yeah, this is kind of what you get. And normally what happens, I'm not going to go deep into this, but because it kind of got even out of role play mode a little bit here too. Oh, quick stats on property. It's like, well, that's not a conversation. But this is what happens oftentimes. And this is where you have to be careful with AI in general, is sometimes it will roll out of role play mode sometimes too, and you have to pull it back in, right? So it's, so basically what happens here is, it says, well, would you like me to walk you back through the backyard space and show you where the property line is? Or should we chat more about, what your ideal forever home looks like, right? So it's being very assumptive here. And traditionally what will happen is you'll go like one go around and then it will try for the close. Hey, would you like to get into a buyer consultation? And you're like, what? I don't even know you. We haven't even had a conversation. So this is what I wanted to do, is I wanted to demonstrate to you, this is why it's not good, in my opinion, to have AI be the agent. Even though you want it to give you the best practices, it's not going to give you the best practices. So if we switch it a bit, what we can do, though, is we can be the agent, and then we give it context. In terms of, like, let's say the open house buyer in this case. Now, what's critically important when you do this is the context. Now, I'm going to back up a step here for just a second and let you know, you may have seen some role play partner AI GPTs or gems or whatever, depending on the product they're associated with, circulating around. There's even one that Phil Jones has that's based on the exactly what to say model, for example. While these are good, they're not necessary. So some of these, they're good because they'll give you an idea, like it'll coach you on how you could have done better based on their disc profile, for example, or certain other things, or things that you could have said that are based on the training models of whoever's providing this. And that's all fine. But I want to let you know, you don't need to use those products. You've got what you have already to have a great role play with AI. Okay? So let's start a new chat here. And let me make sure, I'm going to make sure I can pull up the chat here. Where's the chat? Here we go. Just in case you guys have questions along the way. Make sure I get caught up there. Okay. So we're going to create some context around the flip side of this, an open house buyer conversation that we'll use in this example. So I'm going to say, I would like to practice an open house conversation with a prospective buyer. The prospect should be somewhere between warm and skeptical, maybe a 5 out of 10 on difficulty to convert. So I'm going to stop there for a second because this is important. You need to tell it how hard it should be to convert them. Should it be super easy? Should it be really difficult? I did 5 out of 10 just to throw something right in the middle. But I said 5 out of 10 in terms of difficulty to convert. Okay. Now, if you put like an 8 out of 10, you're probably going to have to work harder at creating conversation. Right? If you put 1 out of 10, they'll probably just chat and give you, just lob you a bunch of softballs. Right? So put it at whatever level you want and feel free to increase it as you go. So we'll add to this. We went through the initial greeting and they had looked at a couple open houses prior to this one. I sent them off to tour the house, went back in the kitchen, and they just circled back around to the kitchen after touring the rest of the house on their own. So I've given a little bit more context on where we are in this situation, okay? I'll add to it. There were a couple things they found that resulted in this house not being a great fit for them. My goal is to get them booked into a buyer consultation. So I'll start this conversation. So we let them know a pretty common situation, right? And there were a couple things that they found that resulted in this house not being a great fit for them. So we need to give them, the AI, this context. Okay. My goal is to get them booked into a buyer consultation. This connects with that 5 out of 10. So it knows my goal is to get them booked into a buyer consultation. You're going to make it about a 5 out of 10 difficulty to do this. Okay. And so I say, I'll start the conversation. I don't know if I'll change the punctuation here. I'll just say conversation. I'll start the conversation. So we're just giving it the information first. Okay, so it adds to the context. The buyer has been looking for about 3 months, 5 out of 10, definitely ready to buy. Starting to get a little frustrated with the market, hyper aware of flipper special red flags. Now, sometimes, just so you know too, you can do the same role play over and over with AI, and it will act slightly differently on each one. So this is actually the first time I've done this where it actually told me Marcus, right? It gave my buyer a name. It hasn't done that before with me. And it gave me a little bit more context about where Marcus is coming from already. So you just walk back in the kitchen after seeing upstairs in the backyard, looking at the countertop, running my hand along the edge, like reading a book, right? And this, what's interesting. So this is where I'm actually glad I did this, because I said, I'll start the conversation, right? But yet it started the conversation, right? So what I'll say, because sometimes it goes a different direction. It literally didn't do this any time that I've ever done this before. So I said that I would start this conversation. I just wanted to set you up with the context on this. So please allow me to start the conversation, not the buyer. And we'll see what it says here. It's a little bit too eager to get into character. Okay. There we go. Now, I have the context. Marcus, standing in the kitchen after a tour. Notice small bedroom and sloped yard. Now, it already gave me some of the information. That's okay. Not a big deal. Wait for you to open line to react to. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to keep this sort of abbreviated just for time purposes. So this isn't as long of a conversation as you're going to have with him. So I'm going to just be really, really brief, but he'll still get the gist. But the idea is that you'll have this conversation as if it's a real buyer. Okay. So I might start out with, they came around to the kitchen. We're standing in front of each other. So I'll say so what were your thoughts on the house? You can be completely honest with me. I'm not the listing agent. Wait for here. There we go. So we've just started the conversation there. So let's see what Marcus comes back with. Marcus shifts his weight, leaning. I feel like I'm reading a book again. But each time it will actually do this a little bit differently. So Marcus says, "Well, I appreciate the honesty. To be fair, the kitchen is great. The photos didn't lie about that." So Marcus likes the kitchen. But once we got upstairs, those bedrooms are tiny. So small bedrooms, right? Keep that in the back of our mind here. I'm not sure we could even fit a queen bed and a desk in the guest room, which is a problem since I work from home. So key, Marcus works from home. So this is helping you listen for cues as well too. Now, it's a little bit easier when you can read it, right? But the advanced version of this is you stick it like on your phone and you have it actually talk back to you. So you set up the app on the phone, and then you're talking into it is talking back to you, right? And you can literally do it real time, right? So we've got a couple cues there. He glances out the window toward the backyard and the slope in the back. I was hoping for something a bit more level for the dog. Feels like every house we've seen lately has one wow room and then 3 major compromises. Is everything in this neighborhood built this way, or are we just having a run of bad luck today? Okay. So usually, now this is something here. Would you like to address the specific concerns? What I'm going to do, just to make sure it stays in the role play, is I'm going to say, we are still in the role play. I am going to respond next. Usually I don't have to tell it this much to pull it back into the role play without it giving me suggestions. Okay. 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 Okay, this is interesting. It's curious. Hold on a second. Remember, you are the buyer. I am the agent. Let me talk. Sorry, I get a little bit direct with AI sometimes. Okay, now it's back to where we need to be. Interesting. It doesn't always do this, by the way. Sometimes it just gets a little bit overeager. But if it starts doing something like this regularly, you just add it to your beginning prompt to say, make sure you stay in character in your role until I tell you that the role play is over, right? So you can actually add that. So if I've had this happen, my next prompt that I put in for a role play, I'm going to specify that additional information. Okay. So okay, I just had to. Is everything in the neighborhood built this way, or are we just having a run of bad luck today? So we'll say, hey, thanks for sharing that information about how you felt about this. And yes, most of the houses in this particular neighborhood are actually built this way with this design. So we're just answering a question there, and I can see how the sloped yard would be an issue since you have a dog that you would want to let outside. So I'm just maybe acknowledging something else there, right? So go have that. And actually probably what I do is I'll probably acknowledge them and then thank them for their feedback, but it's fine for this role play. I'll say, so would you be open-minded to me asking you a couple quick questions? I might be able to point you in the right direction. So again, abbreviated version of probably how I would have actually said this. I might have acknowledged them. I might have, I might have thanked them for sharing the information. I might have even dug a little bit deeper, possibly. But the key is I want to get permission to question to continue the conversation. So I'm going to see what it does to respond here. Okay. And also too, in the future, I might actually add to my initial prompt because, it's getting a little bit eager here on creating a story around his body language and everything. Yeah, you can leave that, or you can tell it to leave that stuff out too, right? So he says, well, that makes sense. At least I know I'm not crazy for thinking it's a trend, it's a trend around here. But yeah, go ahead. I'm all ears. That's usually that's the response. Like, oh yeah, what are your questions? Right? Usually people are willing to, they're not going to say, well, that depends on your questions or something like that, right? So this is pretty realistic here. We're definitely looking for, a right direction at this point. What we're doing now feels like a lot of driving and not much payoff, right? So I might say, so let's start to get in the conversation about pain and motivation. So just curious, what initially got you thinking it might be time to move? So just a quick little question that we're showing in there. So it takes a second looking around the kitchen one more time before looking back at you. He seems to appreciate the pivot away from the house's flaws. So honestly, it's the space, the lack of it. Okay, so we know there's a lack of space where he currently lives. We're in a condo downtown right now. And between my wife and me both working from home a few days a week, we're basically sitting on top of each other. Okay, so they work from home a few days a week. Space issue, sitting on top of each other, ready for a yard, bit more breathing room. So if they're living in a downtown condo, they have no yard, right? Bit more breathing room, and they're tired of elevator life. Okay, that's now. Understand, those of you who've done open houses, remember this is a 5 out of 10. A lot of times, an 8 out of 10 buyer isn't going to spill all this right up front. They're going to keep it a little bit closer to their chest, and you'll have to dig a little bit, right? But I'm just giving you an example of where you can go with this at a 5 out of 10 level, right? So he sighs, leaning back at the counter. But I'll be real with you. The plan was to find a forever spot where we could actually grow a bit, right? If I'm trading a condo for a house where the bedrooms are just as small and the yard is unusable for the dog, I start wondering if we're just trading one set of headaches for another, right? Are we just looking at the wrong price point, or is this just what the market is right now, right? So he's open. It gave you a hint here, right? Again, we can put in our initial prompt, please don't give me hints if you don't want to have to deal with that, right? Okay, so we'll acknowledge a couple of things. We'll say, wow, so it sounds like you would be making a big change from no yard to hopefully a decent size yard that's also flat, and also a lot more space, which would make it a lot more comfortable for you to work at home. So maybe we're acknowledging something there, right? And it might say, maybe we're trying to dig a little bit more, okay? So we'll say, so what else about your current situation is not working for you right now? See, we see if we can dig into some other things too and see what it says. Commute, right? So now they just shared something else that he hadn't shared. So commute is the other killer. My wife still has to head in the office 3 days a week, and being stuck in that downtown traffic loop, is draining her. We thought moving out this way would balance things out, but if we're going to add 20 minutes to her drive, the house needs to actually feel like an upgrade, right? So, and I just don't want to move for the sake of moving. If I'm going to pay today's interest rates, so I addressed interest rates, I want to feel like I'm actually gaining lifestyle, not just a mortgage, but every time we see a place that looks perfect online, we get here and it's either not right on a busy road like this one. It has a backyard that's basically a cliff. So they share also too, busy road, right? So we're collecting this information when we're talking with them because we want to be able to show that we heard them, right? So he looks at you with a bit more focus now. You mentioned you're not a listing agent. Do you actually see stuff hitting the market that checks those boxes? Flat yard, decent room, or am I chasing a unicorn in this zip code, right? So again, I feel like this is probably like a 3 out of 10 as far as difficulty because he's kind of thrown us a bunch of softballs here, right? So we'll say something like, so there is actually stuff that hits the market that checks those boxes, but sometimes it's like finding a needle in the haystack. So I've acknowledged something, it's like saying, yeah, it's out there, but it's really hard to find, right? And I totally understand your frustrations. You want to make sure that you're not just making a lateral move, that you're actually making a real move up, because if it's going to cost you more, you want to make sure you're getting something that has a lot of longevity for you. So I'm just acknowledging something else too here. Oops, there we go. So, and then let's add in, we'll just throw in here. So in addition to the location to shorten your commute, having a flat yard, having extra space in the house with larger bedrooms, and living on a road that is not busy and doesn't have a lot of traffic, what are some of the other must-haves on your list? I probably missed some things. So I'm kind of having two conversations here, one with you and one with the AI. But this is the gist of how you might do a role play. So now I want to get, I'm getting from the issues to what they actually want, right? So hit the nail on the head with a lateral move comment. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. As for the other must-haves, a 2-car garage, non-negotiable. So now we're starting to get more of these things as well too. So you're trying to remember all this stuff along the way. This will help you as far as working your memory to remember all these little things that they mentioned too, right? So we know a 2-car garage is non-negotiable. Tired of condo parking shuffle, and honestly, an open concept layout, or at least a kitchen that isn't walled off from the living area. Okay. Don't want to be stuck in a dark corner while everybody else is in the other room. Okay. So giving us a lot of softballs here again. He pauses, looking a bit more serious, but look, I've got all these must-haves, and I've got alerts set up on all the apps, yet I'm still standing in the kitchen with a cliff for a backyard. If stuff is out there, why am I not seeing it until I've already wasted my Saturday driving out here? Now, that is like an underhanded lob softball as well too. So I'm not going to totally go into there because I want to give you a little bit more. He's already showing he's frustrated with the process. He's almost saying, please give me an agent, right? So that's why I said probably a 2 or 3 out of a 10. But what we can say, let's do, yeah, I can really sense that frustration you have on that home buying process. Sometimes it's hard to find things based on just parameters that you put into a search. Sometimes it's the things that a search doesn't expose that are the important things that are either the deal breakers or the deal makers. So I'm at least acknowledging what he said. More often than not, they're just kind of giving you bits and pieces of information. But he gave me a lot of information there, so I'm at least acknowledging that, right? But I'm going to continue on here. I could probably do a close right here, and he'll be like, "Yeah, let's meet." But I'm going to continue on just to kind of do a little bit more build up here, just so you can see, how he might respond. Because this is probably more of the proper process that you'd have with a typical buyer. Is we're going to confirm some of the things that he's dissatisfied with. So we sense the frustration and say, and so we might say, and what I'm hearing is that if you stay where you are, you'll have to continue putting up with having no yard, being on a busy street, having a kitchen that's sectioned off from the rest of the house, not having a great home working space for when you work at home, and having tiny bedrooms that aren't going to really support the growth of your family. Did I get that correct? Now, I could have probably gone straight to the close. I wanted to put that in here in this conversation because that's actually a better practice for a role play, even if they're giving you softballs, right? Because you're really turning the knife here that if they stay where they are, this is what they're going to have to deal with, right? And so we'll see what he does here. Yeah, finally someone gets it, right? So yeah, when you start stringing it together like that, it sounds even more depressing than it feels on a Tuesday morning. But you're exactly right. That's the list of things I'm trying to escape. Now, by the way, I probably missed a couple because he gave so many. Usually they give like 2 or 3 things maybe, and you probably had to dig for those a little bit, right? And honestly, standing here in the kitchen, I realize I'm just as far away from solving those problems as when I woke up this morning, right? He looks at his watch in the back of you. The apps let me filter 4 bedrooms, but they don't have a filter for bedroom that actually fits a desk, or yard that isn't a 45-degree angle, right? And so, which is good. So if the data I'm looking at is the same data everyone else has, how do you actually find the ones that don't have those hidden deal breakers? Because I can't keep spending my weekends being a glorified door opener for houses I'm never going to buy. Now he's practically asking for your process now. That's correct. He is. He's actually made this a little too easy for me. I'm going to skip one step here. And the step is normally in a conversation that's the conversion is a little bit more difficult. You might do an assumptive close. You might say, "Hey, so what it sounds like I'd need to find you something that provides this, or the things that they mentioned that they wanted." Right? Did I get that right? Because that's the point in a typical conversation where if they had an agent, they would tell you they had an agent. They might have told you before that, but if they haven't told you up to that point and they actually really have an agent, they would respond to this. So so it sounds like I would need to find you blank. It's like, "Oh, but I already have an agent." Or they would be like, "Yeah, maybe," right? So they have, he's basically given us, the process. And so I'll say, "Yeah, you're exactly right. And thank you for sharing your frustrations with me. I know this can be tough being a buyer in today's market." And I'll add a bunch of stuff here. I'll say, "One of the things I do for my clients, typically before we even go out and look at homes, is to meet with them to go over the current market and how that will impact them in their home search, what they're likely to experience in the specific areas and price range they're looking in. And we set up a strategy needed up front to successfully win the deal if it's a multiple offer situation, or get the best deal without leaving money on the table if we're the only offer in play." So let's figure out that. And then I'll add some more to it here. We'll actually do like a trial close. This tends to take a lot of the stress and uncertainty out of the buying process. What are your plans later this afternoon, like 4:30 or 5 o'clock? I'd be happy to sit down with you and take you through the process. And he pretty much set us up for this anyways. So we'll just see. I mean, he might just say, "Yeah, sure." Okay. Oh, he's actually going to give an objection. Let's see. Seems to be weighing the value of his time. The strategy part clearly piqued his interest, especially the bit about not wasting his time on houses. That won't work, right? Because he's already told us that he feels like he's wasting time. 4:30, honestly, my wife and I were just going to grab go grab a late lunch and probably vent about this place. I look toward the front door, and his wife is waiting on the porch in the back at you. I like the idea of a strategy. I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm all about that idea, but the data I'm getting from maps is clearly incomplete. If you can actually show us how to filter out these cliff yards and tiny homes before we drive 30 minutes to see them, that would be worth the time. Reaches for the wallet, pull out a card, perhaps his phone, take down your info. Let's do 4:30. So he actually made that really easy. There's a coffee shop about 2 blocks from here, Blue Bottle. Does that work for you? Now, normally I'm the one suggesting the place, right? It was like, oh, let's go down to the coffee shop, Blue Bottle. Does that work for you? So that work for you? And what should I bring? Do you need our pre-approval or just our wish list, right? So pretty easy committed. I've done ones that were 5 out of 10 where it gave one objection and then it said, well, I don't know, we're kind of busy today and tomorrow we work late. Can we do Tuesday, right? And maybe you have to work on negotiating a time at least. If you get to like 7 or 8 out of 10, they'll probably push things off even more. They'll be like, hey, can I just call you next Saturday and let you, my week's really busy. And so that's where setting the difficulty is going to be ultra important in a role play like this, right? And you even saw in this role play, because today we did this way, tomorrow it might be a little bit different. If you did this exact same role play, if you put that exact same prompt I put in tomorrow, or even in just your system today into Gemini or ChatGPT, you would have a different conversation than this, right? But what we learned from this too is one thing that we might want to do is add in. It's like, don't give me hints. Just stay in the role, the character of the buyer in this situation, and I'll tell you when we're stopping the role play. Right? So I might add that to my prompts from now on because we learn. And so what you'll have is you'll save a prompt that has the context that you use over and over, but you'll just change some of that context each time. Right? You'll tell a little bit more about the buyer, a little bit different situation about the buyer, how much pushback, maybe a little bit about their profession so it can figure out how busy it thinks they might be, so to create a realistic type of situation. But this is an example of how you can use this, and there's nothing wrong with taking this slow, meaning that if you don't want to speak into it and you just want to type, because you're so concerned you might get the words wrong or something like that, feel free to do it that way to start out with. It's all practice, right? And if you want to read what it says and then take 5 minutes to think about what your response is going to be, this is fine initially, because you're going to do that and then you're going to take less time and less time and less time. So don't get hung up on, hey, this has to be all real time, because that's what it is in the open house situation, like in this example. It doesn't have to be that way for practice. It's like any of you who have ever taken martial arts, for example. Do they get you right into full speed punches and kicks and stuff? No, they don't. You do everything in slow motion. You're exaggerating everything, right? Because that gets you the muscle memory. So it's okay to start slow here and then work the muscle memory to speed it up and speed it up. And your goal is to get to a point after enough practice on this where you maybe download the app on your phone and you're just doing it with the microphone and having it talk back to you. So you're doing it as if you're having a real-time conversation. But remember, you have to have this set it fast, not thinking. For some of yours, it might default to thinking, but that's the only way that you're going to have it respond back to you quickly enough, right? So does that help a little bit in terms of, here, I'll stop the share here for a minute. Any questions on that? Anybody, any observations on that?
I actually wanted to put in some questions, and everybody, please drop your questions in the chat or come off of mute right away. But I do want to say, David, is it okay to share that prompt with everybody with the summary of today's class?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not sure if you had jotted it down, but I can grab it. And do you want me to paste it in the? Want me?
Yeah, you
Let's
can paste
grab
it
it
in the
here.
chat. And I also just discovered that Zoom has a new AI feature. This might be only available to the paid model, where it's recording a transcript from the entire class. And so we'll see that new summary after
Mm-hmm.
today's class. So drop your email in the chat. And David was using Whisper Flow. That is the tool that he's using to chat back and forth with the AI to just and if I'm not mistaken, David, you set up a key on your computer so that when you click it, it's then recording what you're saying.
Yes, and
Is that correct?
yeah, it's just a key combination on, on depending on the type of computer you have. I have a Windows machine. I just set mine at Control Alt, and some people have it like Control Windows key or whatever. If you have a Mac, you'll have a default combination for that as well too, and just hold it down and you talk. And the difference between something like Whisper Flow and like the hitting the microphone on Gemini, for example, or on ChatGPT, is that Whisper Flow does the transcription, the voice to text based on AI. And so, for example, if I was saying, I'm talking to a buyer about an open house situation, it's going to figure out that I didn't mean to say seller. But yet, if I'm just talking
Mm.
straight, if I use the microphone thing in Gemini and I say it's going to say, it's going to put both seller and buyer into that because it's transcribing word for word as I'm saying it. And that's why you notice when I was talking, it wasn't putting the text in right away until I let up the keys. So I did like 4 or 5 sentences, and then it took a couple seconds. It threw it in the box because it was processing all that based on its large language models. Like, is this what he was really trying to say? I think he said this.
Really
Like,
cool.
like for example, when I would do voice to text, and I'm texting, and I would say, "Tell the seller that." It would my phone, for example, would always say to turn seller into CELLAR, like a wine cellar. I'm like, I'm not talking about a wine cellar. I'm talking about a seller selling their real estate, right? But it guessed. It's like, oh, he says seller. What do I think he means, right? It's doing it one word at a time.
Basic.
Whisper
Yeah.
Flow bases it on the context. And so the accuracy skyrockets. It's like 98%, 99% accuracy, which is really awesome. So,
Amazing. Another follow-up to that. So save your prompt, put it on maybe a time block on your calendar and continually refine that prompt to the way you like that conversation to flow. One thing I wanted to ask, and I will promise to give everybody time to ask David questions. Do you want to practice different scenarios? Is there a cadence to how much you want to practice open house versus other scenarios? And is the difficulty level, is it fair to just kind of play around with easy, hard, or is there something realistic? And then with that conversation, those checkpoints, what are those checkpoints in that conversation? And could you add that to the prompt? Possibly, this is all in carving out the prompt.
and context is key too on the prompt. You give it as much information as you can. In fact, we had someone that this is a great way to use it too. I didn't mention this earlier. Is is he held an open house? He had a couple buyer conversations, and he wasn't able to convert one buyer that he was hoping he would be able to convert. And so he decided to take it to ChatGPT or Gemini, whichever one he used. And he created that context. He put in the prompt. This was the situation. This is the buyer situation. They walked in. Here was their background. And he created the role play. And he told me that when he did the role play, it was literally the exact conversation that he had with the actual real buyer. He's like, it literally mirrored I gave it the context, and then it was giving me the same objections that the buyer gave me. And he said the difference is I got to think about it a little bit and adjust my strategy on the objection handling to be able to change my approach to see how that might have worked. And it was I felt pretty convinced that when I got the right strategy, it probably would have worked on this buyer because
Mm,
AI did such a great job of mirroring this actual buyer conversation.
pretty cool.
Hi, David. What was the difference in strategy that he adopted, if you know?
Wait, the difference in strat? Oh, I'm not sure. What he adopted that he used?
Yes.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. He used it for practice because he was trying to figure out. It's like, well, what would get them over this little hump? I'm not even sure what the objection was where he was hitting a wall. Because there's probably some certain objection. He's like, oh, I could have probably answered this better, but let me set up the same conversation. So yeah, I'm not sure on that, but by the way, this is somebody who is an expert at open houses that was doing this. So this is someone who is great at conversion. He typically will go and do 2 or 3 open houses on a weekend and get at least one buyer that weekend. and sometimes two, sometimes three from doing 3 open houses. So someone who's that good, but even he had situations where it's like, I didn't convert this buyer. I feel like I could have. He took it to AI and ran that same conversation through right up to the getting the same objections to where he could start dealing with these objections in possibly a different way, use a different approach to see what approach would work too. So, because one thing about AI is you can stop a conversation and say, hey, let's back up to this point in the conversation. Forget everything after that. And we're going to replay the conversation from this point and try a different response. You can actually do that with AI, which is kind of cool. And it will actually forget where you are to say, okay, great. We'll take the conversation from this point on, and then you can do a different approach, which is kind of cool. So one thing I'll note from the chat too. So just so everybody knows, that whisper flow is free up to a point. So most people will find that they can just use the free version. What it does is it supposedly slows down after you do like 2,000 words a week or something like that. But it'll let you go a lot longer than that before it gives you a hard stop. And so I used the free version for a long time before I finally maxed it out. And I'm like, I still have a lot of talking to do. I better use the paid version here. It's pretty cheap. I don't know. I don't remember. It's like 12 or 15 bucks a month. It's pretty cheap. Of course, when you add AI tools and 10 times whatever, it gets expensive. But it is cheap. I think it's worth it. I think it's one of the best breakthroughs in a long time. It's a very simple thing, something that's been around forever, but it took a different approach to it, which is voice to text through AI. Right now, it's available on Windows, Mac, iPhone. They're developing it for Android. Last I checked, they don't have it available for Android yet, but they did say they're in development of it. It's to come soon, just anytime. So.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Yeah. And I'm not sure too. Just if I didn't answer what you mentioned, JC, completely, let me know too, because I danced around a lot of stuff too there. So.
You did, and it was a long question. It was a long-winded question. There's the part about continuing to restructure your prompt, but also the part about checkpoints in the conversation, because you're able to drive the conversation and tell it when to stop. What are those checkpoints that you may want to have in every conversation to ensure you're like doing everything that could happen realistically?
What I like to do in any conversation is, especially whether you're dealing with an objection, whether you're talking to someone at an open house, is check in with them. You'll notice that there were a lot of situations there where I repeated, I summarized what they told me. So these are things that if you were to check in with yourself along the way in doing a role play, that's one place to check in and say, hey, is there somewhere I need to go that I need to acknowledge that they've said, and maybe even confirm it. Just, what do I need to say in order to show them that they've been heard? So I think that's a great practice in any role play, in any real play, in any situation. Is a checkpoint is ask yourself, what have I acknowledged that they have told me, right? And I don't know if that's what you meant by check-in or checkpoint, but those are things I like to do as well too. And by the way, you'll notice that even that role play that I do with AI, that's a structured conversation. It may not have felt super structured. It was a structured conversation. I mentioned that we already did the greeting. I sent them through the open house. They came back. I did permission to question. Would you mind me if I ask you a couple quick questions? I could point you in the right direction. Giving control to them so they can give it back to me. Finding out the motivation. What is it what's I think it might be time to move? And now we're looking for an event essentially there, right? If possible, they don't always volunteer an event or some specific thing like, our house is so crowded, I tripped over a box in the middle of the night that was sitting next to the bed and I hit my head on the side of the windowsill or something like that, right? They don't always give you that much information, but sometimes it really comes down to that. It's like sometimes you're driving for an event. And if we had more time, I would have dug deeper into that to find out what the event was, what happened to finally let them, got them in that mindset of I've had enough of this. We want something else, right? What was that thing? And then digging into the current dissatisfaction, right? What is it about your current situation that's not working for you? What else? What else? What else? Right? Now, I didn't do a lot of what else just because of time, but I would have done that in a real situation. And then switching over to their future promise, right? So, what are some of the must haves on your list besides these other things that you told me? What else are must haves on your list, right? We got additional information. Oh, 2-car garage, right? They didn't say anything about that before, right? So, we get, a little bit more information. And then switching over to summarizing, right? Summarizing what they don't want, right? If you stay where you are, turning the knife again. If you stay where you are, you have to continue putting up with blank, 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 all these things. Did I get that right?
Right.
Showing that you heard them, confirming that, right? Getting them to say, yes, that's exactly, and this too, right? Or whatever it might be. Okay, great. Well, so then what I need to find you is something that gives you this, this, and this, and this, all those things that they mentioned that they did want. Right? It's kind of a trial close in a sense because it's an assumptive close, right? Well, no, I need to find you this. They give pushback a little bit. They tell you they have an agent. They say, yeah, that's exactly what I need, but we're not sure we want to work with you yet, or we're not sure who we want to work with yet, or we're really early in the process, right? So that was a structured conversation. So this is also a really, really great way to practice structured conversations like that. Because after I confirm that, then I go straight into the close for the buyer consultation, right? I'm mentioning like 3 distinct values they're going to get, or 3 distinct values that my clients get, because we're acknowledging they're not my client yet, but they can get the special bonus of being my client, which comes with all this value, right? So we meet for a buyer consultation. This is one thing I go over in the buyer consultation. But I mentioned one of the things I do with my clients, usually before we even start looking at houses, because I'm acknowledging there that what they've said is they've wasted a lot of time looking for houses that weren't a good fit. And so I'm saving them potentially from any future hassle by bringing that up. One of the things I do with my clients before we even usually go look at houses is this. And we know they've already looked at houses, but that's okay because now they can draw a line. Okay, I'll go to this buyer consultation. I'll sit down. I'll see what he has. We'll decide whether we want to work with him or not, right? But also too, like if you have to go into objection handling on that, I let them know it's no obligation, right? Things like that, and I focus on the things that they told me, the value of their time, right? They don't like to waste time. And so that's how you deal with the objections, essentially, is you call out things that they've already told you. If you had a conversation like that, a structured conversation like that, then you're more likely to be able to call out things. Since you said this, I'm concerned that this might happen to you if you don't do this, right? It's letting them, you're setting yourself up for this. But this is where it becomes real to you. When you're doing that role play with AI, you get to study that conversation, right? You can even go back at the end, and let's say they're like, yeah, let's book the appointment. You book it. Then you can say, okay, role play's over. Can you rate how I did on a scale of 1 to 10? And let me know what I did well and what I could improve on.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And this is where it does a really good job too, is rating you on how you did. And it will tell you, it'll say you did these things really, really well. And you could have improved or gone deeper here or changed this up because it felt a little abrupt when you did this, for example. I'd rate you a 7 out of 10, right? Or something like that. So you can ask for that rating. But just remember, if you remember one thing from this, remember that the initial prompt is the gold. That's what's going to determine how this goes. Now, I could probably, that prompt was several sentences long. Your prompt can get into several paragraphs long if you want to make sure you're dialing in how you want this to go. Right? Because we talked halfway through this that I would throw a thing in saying, hey, stay in character until I tell you that we're done with the role play. Right? Don't give me hints. Right? Don't throw me multiple softballs in a row, even if I say, I only want a 5 out of 10, right? Or something like that. You can explain stuff like that And this way, you keep a prompt, keep it saved somewhere in a note app or a document or something like that. So you can copy and paste and just change some of the buyer situation in the context, right? Oh yeah, in the comment, you specifically asked to move out of role play mode and ask how you're doing in the conversation and request to move back into the role play mode for further yes, yes, you could totally do that. Especially now, if even if you get stuck, you could also roll back. You could say, hey, let's step out of the conversation for a second. So I was thinking about going this route, but what would you recommend? Now, you have to be careful if you ask it for a recommendation because it might not always give the best recommendation. You have to weigh it out and be like, hey, based on what I know, is that the best step to go from here? Right? And then you say, okay, let's go back into character and continue the role play. Next line is me being the agent. And then you start typing after that. So yeah, you can move in and out, and as you can see, sometimes it gets a little bit eager to move out of the conversation too. So there have been several times I've done this where halfway through, it's giving me feedback on it. I'm like, whoa, wait, stay in character. We're not done. It's like, oh shoot, sorry, right? So yeah, yeah, you can use Gemini Gem if you're using ChatGPT. You can save it as a custom GPT, to save the prompt and save context, for example, too, because yeah, that first prompt is basically the rules that AI is going to abide by to make sure that it's going the direction and has the experience that you want. That makes sense?
Super awesome. We have a couple more minutes for some questions. You
Yeah.
guys give it up for David. He's amazing, our productivity coach. And if you guys are meeting him for the first time, he's amazing. Get to know him. Meet with him if you want. He's our productivity coach. He's awesome. Thank you guys for being here. This is a great class. Thank you so much, David.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks everyone. Oh,
Another
got a question,
question,
Christine.
Christine.
Oh,
Yes.
yes. David, I actually saw your video on the Productivity Coach website for offer writing. Do you offer like recurring classes for things like that as well?
We don't have that mainly because we have a for like contracts and stuff like that. We have some video training, but we try to combine that and not to overstep what the designated brokers and offices might be doing a little bit too, like contracts classes and stuff like
Mm,
that. So we had to figure out where to draw the line on how far we go on that and try to keep it concise, specific, few different forms and contract related things for productivity coaching, and then adding the coach support and the any designated broker classes that might be taught to that as well too.
okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Awesome. We good on that? Any questions? Mm-hmm. Cool. All right.
Good.
Well, I appreciate all of you showing up and staying.
And staying.
All right.
Alrighty, we'll see you guys back next week. This entire month is filled with a lot of guests for a Tech Thursday. Tell your friends. See you there next week. If you want to still drop your email in the chat, we'll send you a follow-up email with a recording and a transcript of today's class. David, your prompt, I can send that in there too. So
Yep.
you can email that over when you bring the chance.
All right.
Thank you
Great.
guys. Have a great Thursday and weekend.
Bye, everyone.